사방팔방.
Hey guys, welcome to the Korean Always podcast. This is a new podcast where myself and my friend, we're going to talk all things Korean, culture, immersion, etc. My name is Ademola.
And I'm George, here to join you on this podcast adventure that we just started.
Yeah, and we're both two guys that have basically spent the past year and a half doing a lot of Korean immersion, and there's been some ups and downs, and we wanted to talk about immersion and kind of just go about the entire, journey that we've been on.
Yeah.
See how other people have been learning Korean and kind of like spread the message of Korean immersion.
Yeah, certainly. Hopefully we can help you guys with these tips and tricks. But to start off, then we should probably give a little background as to who we are, what we do, how we even got here in the first place. So I'm going to not start myself. I'm going to let Ademola take it away. And so Ademola, first of all, who are you? How did you get into Korean? Tell us about your journey up until now. Take it away.
Right. That is a very good question. So my name is Ademola. I'm 19 years old. I live in the United States. Been born and raised here, but my family is from Nigeria. How I got into Korean was kind of I don't know, it's kind of tough to say, but for the most part, Korean just felt like I've always liked languages, and all the stars kind of aligned on Korean at some point.
Korean chose you, huh?
Korean chose me. Everyone says that. It was in about, I want to say, 8th grade that I think YouTube recommended, showed this video called Learn the Korean Alphabet. Learn how to read Korean in 5 minutes. I'm not sure if you've seen that video before.
You love that. That's clickbait. I have not seen the video, but I've seen similar. Yeah.
Man, I'll tell you, that video, I had no idea anything about Korean, or I had basically no interest or no thought in my mind about what Korea or Korean was. I was like, but when I watched that video, I was like, oh, why not? So I watched that video. I watched it like 4 or 5 times. And like I remember in 8th grade, I learned how to read Korean. And I just go through Wikipedia pages and be like, oh, I can read Korean. And I try and like tell people I can read Korean. But like no one cared. And then eventually I was like, oh man, this is kind of hard. How the heck do I learn words? So I got kind of freaked out and I stopped. But, like how eventually there was like a couple of events in my life that were like, wow, Korean, like came up over the next like 4 years of my life. So it was like I think it was my first year of high school. I had a Korean teacher, Miss John. And she was like the greatest teacher I'd ever had. And I got like the highest grade in math like ever in my life.
A Korean teacher, you mean? Oh, she was a maths teacher.
Yeah, she was a math teacher.
Oh, so she wasn't a Korean teacher.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I never took Korean. Yeah, right. So she was a Korean woman that was teaching math in my high school. And I remember I took that class, and that was like the best experience I'd ever had in math class. Like some kids in the class were talking about like, oh, she has an accent. But I was like, dude, like she teaches math better than anyone I've ever had. So that was the first experience. Then my second year of high school, I had a teacher that was from America, but he taught in Korea. And he continuously introduced us to Korean media in class. Like he showed us movies in Korean. And then my junior year.
That's unusual, yeah.
I found K-pop.
Oh, here we go.
Here
we go, everybody. the drug of choice.
Right. I think, man, I don't even want to. We can just say K-pop was then like the initial like boom, like, oh man, this shit is kind of tough.
I have a similar story,
Right. And then by the time I reached my senior year, it was like, okay, it's time to go. And I was like, I think it was January 7th is the exact date that I was on an internship, and I met the the wife of my governor, who just so happened to be Korean.
Oh,
and I was like, yo, this is kind of like, a little bit like every single year I had an experience. So then I made a promise to myself, you know what? I'm going to try and learn Korean. And then from that day on, I started working towards learning. That was how I got introduced.
Okay.
How about
Nice.
you, George?
Okay.
How did you get introduced in
Yeah,
your
right.
Korean
Yeah,
culture?
yeah. Very glad you asked. So first of all, I Korean wasn't the sort of first language that I ever tried to learn, but I'll sort of bring it back to that in a sec. So first of all, I had a Korean friend in the first year of, I want to say not high school, because in the UK we have a different school system. So in the first year of middle school, for the international viewers,
Right.
I had a Korean friend who came over from the UK and didn't speak any English at all. Like literally came over with whatever, like elementary level Korean or elementary level. We'll
Oh,
do this bit again.
English.
Yeah,
English.
English. Yeah, so elementary level English, which he'd got from his Korean education in Korea. So he came over here not knowing much English, and at the time, I didn't really have. I actually never seen anyone outside of the UK, or rather, I should say, a foreign person who's living in the UK, who like has never had like
Oh,
sort of
really?
lack of knowledge of English, or at least in my memory,
Most
I
people
may
you
have
spoke
seen,
to,
but most people I
right?
spoke to, were fluent in English, and I just sort of thought the whole world was like pretty damn good at English, right? So
Mm.
this friend of mine slowly, started to learn more English. I was like, huh, that's funny, that's interesting. Why don't I try and learn Korean? I mean, hey, like he's just spent all this effort learning my language. So like, maybe like 2 years later, I go on YouTube, right? And I remember this moment quite vividly. I just searched Korean music. So I'm like, I think I searched Korean. I don't even know what I searched. Something Korean. Korean music comes
Yeah.
up. The first video, Twice, Cheer Up, like
Oh
million views.
man.
I clicked that video, and from then my life changes.
Ah, twice, twice was the path,
So
man.
you already know. I haven't actually admitted this online anywhere before, but yeah, from that moment on, I got like sucked into like Twice, and like I must have spent about $1,000 or more on like all their merchandise, and like I was like a big
Oh
fan,
snap!
and
You were a Stan. Okay, so
yeah, and it was funny because at the time, this Korean friend, I didn't really think much of it. Like I was just like, oh, he just happened to, you know, just come in and learn English, but the impact it had on my life is something that I can't even describe very well. It's a very sort of
mm,
like you described it, something like it chose you kind of thing. And
right.
then since they're in the same school, there was a biology teacher who actually had lived in Korea. She was British, but she'd lived in Korea, and she what should I say? She was like able to speak a certain level of Korean, and she would like speak to the kids. And there were just other events, later in life that were sort of Korean related, like all these other Korean people. Like I went to a Korean friend's house, had like all this dinner, all this sort of thing.
Oh,
And
nice.
but yeah, because of that experience, I got like really into Twice, and then I ended up going on holiday to Korea. So at this point, I should say that my Korean learning experience was only like really basic, like using textbooks, like
Mm,
talk to me in Korean, learning
right.
Hangul, this like sort of basic
Right.
beginner stuff. And then in school, I was going to bring it back to this. I learned French and Spanish from a very young age. So I learned French from a very young age, and then Spanish was sort of at the beginning of middle school. So I'd had some experience learning languages. So, but up until then, of course, it was only textbook stuff. And
Right.
right up until the very sort of last few years of high school, I didn't know about immersion. So I was like really doing textbooks for Korean. I was like, oh, I think this is going to get me real fluent.
Right. Yeah.
And I was kind of dissatisfied with my progress.
Mm,
And one day, I came on YouTube and I came across Matt vs Japan and this immersion stuff. And then this was about a year and a half ago, right? So from that point onwards, I decided that I'm not gonna carry on the way I am because I'd probably been learning Korean off and on for like 4 years with like
yeah.
little progress to show for it. So I wanted to get serious, and yeah, since then I just took the red pill, went real serious. And for those of you who follow my YouTube page, I've actually lived out in Korea on my own for 5 months because that was that's we can get into that a little bit
Right.
later on, but that is another thing that sort of brought me along the path. But no, what another thing that I forgot to mention, it hasn't all been super up, and I've been really loving this whole. I mean, I have enjoyed the journey, but there's been times of like lacks of motivation and ups and downs. But yeah, the main core reason was because of Twice and this friend that I had, and after going on holiday there, I had an amazing time. So I just thought,
Oh
what,
yeah.
all these moments in my life just pushing me down this direction.
Right. And
Probably can relate. Yeah.
you got on the point of immersion, which is kind of
Yeah.
so I guess what we can talk about now
That's
is
the
kind
last
of
straw.
how we got into immersion, and then also I guess even before we get to immersion, I think like you kind of mentioned, I too, when I started like on January 7th, the first thing that I did was I was like, I think it was Pimsleur. I used
Oh,
to watch a
I'm
bunch of
aware.
like, I think if you watch like language YouTubers, you probably have heard of Ikena
Oh, I love
or
him. Yeah.
heard of there's a couple of other YouTubers that talk about, and he always praises about Pimsleur. And I remember like, oh my gosh, Ikena's like amazing
He's
at
the
language.
guy.
Like
Yeah.
Pimsleur's gotta be like
How
the
little
way.
you knew.
So I think it was Pimsleur had like 90 lessons of Korean. And I remember that first day I finessed. Pimsleur has like a way to get like, what's it called, free lessons. So I got like a 7-day
Like,
trial. In that
uh,
7-day trial, they recommend like listening to like one episode a day for like the first lesson listening level. I listened to like 3 lessons a day, which is like an hour and 30 minutes. I was like, dude, I'm gonna be fluent after 90 levels. Like 90 days I'll be fluent. So I was doing all these lessons, and then I remember after each lesson, I had a couple of friends that were Korean in my school. And
mm.
I'd actually go. I actually, this is one of the coolest things. Like, I went up to one of my Korean friends, and I was like, "Oh, 안녕하세요."
Oh yeah, I've done that. Oh,
And I was like, I
what was
started
their
to. The
reaction?
thing
Yeah.
is, the thing is, like, I was like, I just walked in class and I just spoke. Like, I didn't tell them I was learning Korean. I just walked up
Ah,
to them and I spoke to them in Korean, and they were like, oh my god, you speak Korean." And the thing was,
really?
in the
I was.
midst of this,
Hmm,
there were like my other like American, like
yeah.
English speaking friends, right? That couldn't understand a lick of Korean. And they were like, holy crap. They
Really?
were like freaking out.
They
So,
were.
like, this was like,
They gave
yeah,
a
they
good
were freaking
reaction.
out. Yeah, they gave a
Wow.
reaction.
I got the
Like, I
complete
remember,
opposite. But I'll let
oh,
you
really?
finish. Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, really? Tell me about that. Tell me about that.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah. No. You mentioned saying annyeonghaseyo to like your friend. When I did that, my friend just looked me in the face and laughed at me, like straight up, just like, "Pff," like what was that?
Bruh.
And a lot of other people in the UK, and I think this is a theme in the UK versus the US. A lot of people in the UK tend to put down other people's dreams, whereas in the US, it's like American dream, all of this.
American Dream.
But in the UK, it's like it's the dumb thing to just put other people's dreams down and be like, "Wow, that's rubbish" or whatever, or sort of make fun of someone. So yeah, I wouldn't say I got bullied. I didn't get bullied that bad, but people would make fun of me because I was like the Korean kid. They'd be like, "Oh,
Oh,
you just want to be Korean." Oh,
oh,
so
that's,
I'd get a lot of hate for trying. But funnily enough, that one comment from this best friend of mine, who said my annual essay was like terrible, that just fueled me. That was like, no, 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 I'm gonna
oh,
learn this for
really?
real. I
Oh,
didn't know it at the
man.
time, but like looking back, that moment was quite big in terms of like, no, 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 I'm proving him wrong.
So
Like
wait, it was your Korean friend that was like,
this
"Oh,
one
you're
best
on your."
friend, yeah, he just like laughed at me
Oh,
in the
oh my
playground.
god! So like you were like, "Man, you can't." It's like I'm gonna get good. It's that moment, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean,
Damn.
it seems, and also, yeah, people aren't, at least in the UK, in my school where I was at, people weren't really bothered about like foreign culture and stuff. Like I said
Right.
before, it was, it's rare to see, and also people at that age are quite immature, so they were just like, "Oh wow, you want to be Korean? Wow."
Mm,
They'd make fun of you, whereas it sounds like you got quite a lot of encouragement, which is
Wait, how
interesting.
old were you at that time? Like, what year was that?
So
Middle school or was
year
that
eight,
high
so middle
school?
school, yeah, middle school.
Oh, middle school, middle school. Oh, yeah, I was in about like third. Wait, I was in my fourth year of high school. So, I mean, yeah, I was a senior in high school. So, people are a little bit more mature, you know?
Right.
Yeah, that's probably one of the differences. But I guess now we can get into how we discovered immersion. You kind of
Oh,
talked a tiny bit about that earlier. Um, do you want to tell us how did you find? I mean, you mentioned a little guy. Oh, not little guy with that. You mentioned
Woo, watch
you
out!
mentioned he's a little
Jumping.
bit big on YouTube now. We'll say,
Yeah.
but you mentioned a guy. What was the Matt versus Japan?
That is the name. That is the name.
how did you define Matt versus Japan?
Yeah, so I mentioned that I was pretty dissatisfied with my Korean up until that point. This is
Right.
about 1.5 years ago, right? And I was just using textbooks, and I would be watching, the Ikena, I don't know, Lindy Botes, like all the polyglot YouTubers,
Right. Same. Same.
and like Steve Kaufman as well was one. But I was just really convinced that the only way to learn language is through sort of the traditional stuff we learn in school with textbooks, exams, all this sort of study, but no
Right.
immersion, right?
Right.
And then
Right.
one day, somehow upon YouTube, I can't remember exactly how I found it, but I came across Matt versus Japan, and it was like an old, like proper based video,
Oh
one
yeah.
like you need to wake up, meditate every morning,
Oh yeah.
get 8 hours Japanese, or
Yeah.
like your life is worthless. So,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
and I just was really taken away by how different that was from everything else that I'd saw. In terms of like just like being able to watch Korean TV without any English, is that even
Right.
possible? Like, can you do
Right.
that?
Right.
So I've always been really sort of like skeptical of like cults and like religion and these sorts of things. But for some reason, the cult of immersion learning,
Oh
I was just
god.
like, the science, it adds up. It makes sense. And I was just, after like a few months of watching his videos sort of alongside these other YouTubers, I
Right.
eventually like started to unsubscribe from all these other guys and
Yeah.
was like, immersion must be the way because I'm trying it now and it just works. So
Right.
there's no one sole factor. It was just kind of luck of the YouTube algorithm. The YouTube algorithm has
Oh,
done wonders for me.
for
First
real.
with the K-pop, and then now immersion learning. Hey,
Yeah.
I wonder what there's going to be in the future. But yeah, how about yourself?
Yeah.
Like to hear more.
So it was, I remember the day vividly, and I actually remember
Whew.
the exact video that it was.
Oh really?
I remember it was around, so COVID had hit and
Oh
we were out
yeah,
of school.
yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah.
school was canceled. And so this is my senior year of high school. And so they basically were like, oh, yeah, you're going to be out for 10 days. And it was like, oh, 10 days turned into 10 weeks, and then school's over.
Yeah.
All right.
Everyone
But
felt that on that time.
essentially, so it was in the middle of the summer, or the very beginning of summer. It's actually before my graduation. I remember I was looking for like, how can I improve myself? I was super addicted to video games.
Oh yeah.
I put in upwards 10,000 hours on a couple video games over like the course of high school.
Yikes.
And I remember I was like, man, if I spent those 10,000 hours on something else, what could I do? Like, dang, I should do something. Like, if I'm gonna spend my
Mm,
time with something, I want to like be getting value out of it. That
that
was
is
like
true. Yeah.
what came out of me. And I remember I started watching like a bunch of like self help, not self help and motivation videos. Like what's it
What
called? I started watching a bunch of like all these videos that were like trying to
was it?
like, oh, how to learn how to do this. Yeah, yeah.
Was it like sort of like rise and grind, like those sort of like you see those
Right.
videos on YouTube, like
Yes. Yes.
go to the
Yes. It was
gym,
literally
all of those.
exactly. Exactly. That was
Okay,
the
yeah,
stuff. That was the stuff that I was watching, and I remember
yeah.
after watching like my entire YouTube feed was basically like all these videos, but over the course of that time, I actually I was doing HelloTalk. So I got
Mm,
in. I was thinking to myself, I need to like speak to people. I need to speak to people. So I was
uh,
always every single day
Outfit.
texting Korean people. I had like a couple of friends made, like, and
Mhm.
by that time I was like, man, this is the way. But the thing was, every single time I texted someone, I had a translator open. And I throw something in, check it, send it. Throw something in, check
It
it,
was
send.
one of
And
those,
like,
yeah.
and that was so exhausting. And I was just like, why is can I ever get fluent? Like that's something that came through my mind.
Ah,
But
did-
then
mm.
on June 2nd, 2020,
The day
I
is it
found
marked in stone, ladies and gentlemen.
it's working. I
Remember those
found
days.
what was it? It was the Bradley Cooper video. You've
Uh
seen, I mean, you know, the Bradley Cooper video of Matt versus
oh.
Japan where Bradley Cooper is running infinitely. I think it
Oh, that
was
is the video that, yeah, yeah,
that
I remember
video.
that.
That
Mm,
video popped up in my recommended, and
that was a
I'll
big one
tell
for me
you,
too.
I even put a comment that day. That day I
Oh.
watched it, I put this was like the greatest video I'd ever seen. Like
What was it
literally,
called?
it was
If you
called
can't understand your target
what?
language, something like that.
Yes, why you can't
Why you
understand your
can't?
target
Mm,
language. I think that's what it is. And
yeah.
after watching that video, I was like, "Oh my gosh, where was this guy?" I was like, "Matt versus Japan? How the hell? What? Who's this
Mm,
guy?" And from that day forward, I binged his entire channel,
oh,
and I was like, and I just studied everything. I was like, "All right."
yeah.
Somehow, like in that moment,
I've done
Like
that.
I even posted a comment, like I subscribed, like that was like, this is it. Like I believe, like for some reason, it
Oh,
just
he
felt
caught you
like
up.
this was the
Yeah.
way. This was the way. And I remember I actually was like, hey guys, I can't output anymore because it's gonna screw up my accent.
No way. Oh
I
no.
texted I texted my friends, hey
Yeah.
guys, it's a little bit tough, but I won't be able to talk to you guys for about 2 years.
And you were convinced, like there was no
And I
sort of
was
like
right.
wishing, like doubt in your mind.
Yeah. Yeah, I wasn't having any, Weishin. There was no like
None of that.
well, there was somewhere in my mind where I was like, "Oh my gosh, how?" Like the real question was how. Cuz it was like,
Uh,
I know this is the way. Like it just sounded so right, like getting
yeah.
input, watching stuff. Like who would have thought everyone's focused on like learning from books and learning from
Mm.
like just talk to
It's
me
the
in
real red pill,
Korean
really.
and all that stuff. And it was just like, wow, why have I never thought of watching a show in Korean?
Mm.
And it was there that I basically watched all his videos. I subscribed to the Patreon. I finished all of the I watched every. I went through like
Patreon
all
as
of
well.
those. What's it called? I looked. So he has like questions, like Q and
Q and
A's.
A's, yeah.
Q&A's. So I watched. So I'd search a question. I'd be like, okay, I'm curious about like output and when's output possible. And then I'd see like a bunch of videos about output. I'd watch just that question, and then sometimes I get sucked in and I watch the entire thing. And like just watching that was like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. And then from that point on, July 1st, I was like, I'm ready. I'm ready to start immersing. And then it was from there until now. I've now been immersing July 1st until today. What is that? Like a year and a
Yeah, a
half,
bit,
almost
yeah.
18 months. 18 months by
Right.
January 1st.
And
Yeah.
this is the first time you ever did any sort of foreign language practice. I mean, those guys on HelloTalk must be really, eager now, waiting for the 2 year mark for you to come back
You
and be,
know,
hey, I finished, guys. Look at me, I
the
made
tough
it.
thing,
If they're still there,
right, right. The tough thing
yeah.
is I actually re-downloaded HelloTalk. What was it? After about a year and a half. Oh, not a year and a half. It's not even a year and a half yet. But like a year and a couple months.
Mm.
And I remember I was like, oh man, there's like this one close friend, like this really close friend I had. Like thankfully I saved their Instagrams for a couple of friends. But there was like this
Okay.
one really close friend that I had on HelloTalk. And then she was like, oh yeah, message me in like 2 years. And I was like, oh man, I'm back in 2 years. But oh, she deleted her account.
No.
That was the thing is I kind of knew why because she was getting like a bunch of like stalkers or like weird guys.
Yeah.
HelloTalk is a
HelloTalk.
creepy place. Or,
I've been, yeah,
people use it as like a
had
dating
the
app and
experience.
shit.
I mean, you say that though. That is true. But I've actually met
Right.
one not actually HelloTalk, but there's another app called Tandem, which is basically the same thing. I've actually met one sort of serious like long term friend because of that. But
Oh yeah.
yeah, most of the people on there, they delete their accounts or they're like
Right.
just they'll talk to you for a little bit and then they'll end up deleting you or whatever. In fact, I never had anyone message me directly, but maybe that's just like my profile.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but HelloTalk. There's some like sort of good stories like of people like meeting their true love on HelloTalk,
Oh
and
yeah.
then
Yeah, exactly.
most of it, guys, is just gonna be probably not worth your time if I'm honest. That's my 2 cents.
We have to talk about that in another episode.
We'll save that. We'll save that. Yeah,
Save it for an episode. So yeah, so that's our introduction
Introduction.
to immersion. So I guess we're both learning Korean. So where was your first step? How did you take your first steps into immersion? What were the
Yeah,
first things you did? Were there any things you did to prepare? Was there anything you were
right.
like, okay, I need to do this, or were the first shows you watched?
Oh, okay. Okay. So interestingly enough, like I said before, this wasn't the first sort of time that I tried learning a language. So I thought I knew what I thought I knew what was up. I thought, hey, I've just watched this new video about immersion ideas, but I wasn't fully sold. Like I wasn't, completely one with the cult that is immersion, like you were.
Right.
Um,
Oh, whoa! It's not a cult. Hey,
it's
I
not
just
a cult.
want to
Yeah,
let the people
guys,
know.
it's
This is,
science.
you see,
Science,
we need to remove that
not
word. We need to
pseudoscience.
censor that word from the podcast. Okay.
Okay.
It's
I'll refer. Yeah, because that might scare some people off.
the
Okay.
immersion community. Yes.
Yes, the people who are very passionate about
Yeah.
learning languages effectively.
Yeah.
Anywho, oh dear.
Where were we?
Where was I? Yeah, so I was saying this wasn't the first time that I got sort of like I tried learning a language. So French, Spanish in school, doing the school stuff, and then I was a little bit doubtful of the immersion community, so I didn't actually stop using my textbook. I was using my grammar textbooks like alongside doing some immersion stuff. But there was one thing that I'd like to mention as well is I mentioned French, Spanish, but I'd also dabbled with Japanese before. There was one sort of year in my high school period where there was like a 3-month period where I was like Japanese. It's got to be. I was watching anime. I was fully like I don't know what like some sort of switch went off in my brain, but for like those 3 months, I just
Right,
was
that
so invested,
curiosity, like
buying the figures.
anime
Man, I
is
was so
addictive. Oh
yeah,
yeah.
I was so invested. But thankfully that stopped, and
Oh.
I supported twice instead. No, but so then with the Korean, I was still using my textbooks, my grammar textbooks every day. But like you said, my first show or source of immersion was actually webtoons. So I used to have a tablet, and I would read for like a good 4 hours a day in the boiling hot summer. In the UK doesn't normally get a lot of heat, but it was about 35 degrees outside Celsius. So forget the American stuff. People can
45?
work
Did
it
you say
out.
35?
35,
Oh
which
yeah,
is
that's super
pretty
hot.
hot.
That's like
Yeah.
100 something.
Yeah, and I remember in the summer holidays, I would just lie in my bed reading webtoons for hours on end. And the good thing about webtoons is that it's also similar to like anime or whatever the Japanese learners use. It's so kind of simplified, or the vocab isn't simplified, but the story is just so consumable. Like even if I didn't know what the hell was going on, like I could just look at the pictures and like feel I could enjoy the immersion without having to understand
Right.
too much. That was like the right like. The best sort of beginner
Balanced.
material. And then obviously from there, K dramas. And obviously I was listening to loads of music. I must have listened to like 2,000 hours of music throughout those years before I was like learning Korean seriously. So I must have got a lot of audio input. I mean, we could discuss the benefits of music in another time, but I had a lot of input there. And like I said, I've been doing it sort of on and off with textbooks for a few years. So I kind of made a lot of progress in the textbook world. So I wasn't starting from absolute zero. I mean, I'm sure you probably weren't either. But yeah, so when I was immersing, I wasn't starting from absolute zero. Probably starting from around 2,000 cards from my Yankee decks. But yeah, webtoons, and then I moved on to K dramas because my mum was like on Netflix one day, and she's like, "Oh, like there's these Korean shows popping up." I was like, "Oh yeah, K dramas, whatever. It's probably just not like I just read stuff and watch YouTube or whatever." And we watched 사랑의 불시착, like Crash Landing on You, and that was like, oh,
Not really
okay,
classic, but
because I wasn't
great
yeah, that is a classic, the Ummmmmm, yeah. Oh, I won't go and sing it, but because it was all like Bukan, it was like North Korean as well. So I remember watching that with my mom, and I was like, oh, okay, Korean TV is actually like worth, like it's worthy. It was like I found that Korean TV was cool before it's cool, because now we've got Squid Game and all this stuff, but back then that was like kind of new to both of us, I'm sure. So yeah, it was the Korean TV that actually got me sort of going full immersion mode. So like, what I'm trying to express is there's a couple months where I was just doing the webtoon stuff and YouTube, but then maybe like month 2, month 3, I was like, right, Korean TV, I'm going to drop the textbooks now.
Oh wow!
Because now I'm convinced that I can do this for fun. Like before, I just thought I need a textbook because I need to learn in this way. But then after seeing the effects of TV and just how great TV was, I was willing to just scrap the textbook stuff. No matter whether the method would work or not. I was just like, you know what? This seems like the most fun method, and all I care about is having fun. So
damn.
Yeah.
So like you were still like a little bit like not so sure about immersion, but it was like more fun, so you like started doing that. Oh man.
I think it's not easy, to just, do what you do. Like maybe it is easier to do what you do. I mean, I don't know. I've just always been really skeptical about things in general. So
yeah, I think for the most part, that very beginning, so July 1st. So I was like, all right, this is the first day of immersion. So I was planning this day to start immersing from that day I found Matt vs. Japan. So I found Matt vs. Japan on the 2nd of June, and I was like, oh man, I gotta like get ready. Like I gotta like collect media. I gotta learn how to immerse. I gotta learn when to look up words. I gotta learn this, that. So all these questions are on my mind. So I basically, like I said, like I went to Matt, saw he had a Patreon, saw he had a couple 50, maybe 100 plus like Q&As, and I was like,
Mm.
not 100, I meant somewhere like 50 or so at that time maybe. And I was like, all right, time to watch. So I watched everything, learned everything I wanted to learn from there. So once it came on July 1st, I had Anki set up. I had my computer all ready for immersion. And I remember in some ways, I was always looking at like, oh man, how do I find like the right stuff? How do I find the right stuff? Because
Mm.
it was always talking about like slice of life. Like I was always
Oh,
trying to optimize. So like from the very beginning,
yeah.
I was like, how can I optimize my immersion?
Oh, I
So
didn't
I
care
was
about
like,
any of
how can I
that.
find? You didn't care. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
just like, man, how can I find slice of life media? Like, why is there not a genre called slice of life in Korean? Because when you look at like the Japanese community versus the Korean
Mm.
community, at that time, there was just like there's some like I would search on YouTube like for other people learning Korean
Oh,
through
yeah.
immersion.
You wouldn't get any, would you?
And
Yeah, back then.
man, like I searched, I found like
Oh,
three or
yeah?
four people searching just through YouTube, looking for people to find. Like I guess maybe part of me was like thinking it was less so, does it work? Can I see Korean people that learn Korean through this? It was more
Mm.
like, can I find people that can give me tips on how to get started?
Ah, you're sort of,
So
yeah.
I started
You're,
watching
you're
these people,
Sumians, you know?
and but the thing was, for the most part, there was a couple people that I watched, and they were saying, ah man, I'm giving up. And like some people were saying like I'm giving up. There was like maybe one guy that I saw that was like I think it was from like the Philippines that like really got good, but just like I think it was like one of his like 18-month update or so. He just read hella books and he was able to read a bunch of business books and stuff. And
Oh,
like I
I
got
think
a
I've
lot of
seen that.
tips.
Yeah,
Oh
the
yeah, you've
business
seen
book.
that
He's like
guy?
in the basement with like the
Right.
fan.
Yes.
Yeah, like
Yes.
really
Yes.
crappy
Oh
audio.
man, that dude was like an
I've
OG.
seen
He
it.
gave me motivation in like
Oh,
those that first month. So I guess my first immersion, I started with actually, what was the show? I what the heck was my first show? I can't remember the first show, but I can say part of month in June, I actually watched Crash Landing on You. Also,
oh,
I
of
watched Crash
course.
Landing on
The
You.
legendary.
But the thing was, I watched it. I was like, yo, no subtitles. Just gonna watch Korean, get these ears. And then I
How was
started
that?
watching. I
Hmm.
sat down on my couch, pressed play on Netflix, sat there for 30 minutes, and I was like, this is tough. I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah.
this is kind of hard.
Especially because that drama's in like North Korean as well, so they're
Exactly.
like
Yeah. Right.
"Haomida," like
Right.
all that.
But the
You
thing
know,
is, like,
over the phone.
I didn't even know like any. Like for the most part, my grammar level in Korean at the very start was
Oh,
talk to
you
me in
just
Korean level 2. Talk to me in Korean level
okay,
2
okay. I see
was
you.
the
I see you.
highest I went on grammar and talk to me in Korean. I was
Yeah,
like,
that's
okay,
funny.
that's all I
You
need.
mentioned
Yeah.
that. I was gonna say because when I went out to Korea, I went to a Korean school, and I thought I was the man. Like I thought I knew Korean because I had my talk to me in Korean level 2 book. I read it to level
Oh
2.
man.
So it's funny that how like
Right.
back then our level 2 on the grammar book was like hell yeah, like I'm doing
Yeah.
way better than these other guys, and now we look at that and just like that's not even, do you even know Korean? Can you even like say you know Korean?
Right. You can't
Uh,
really say you know Korean with level 2 grammar. But it's like, but the
like
thing is, with level 2 grammar, you can get started with immersion.
you
Or at
can
least, I mean, not necessarily to say you have to finish
pick
Korean
this
like
out.
level 2 to start immersion, but I'll say
Mm-hmm.
that was where I was, or at least
Yeah,
plus like other videos I watched. So by that time, I was comfortable to at least give myself, okay, I understand I need to accept ambiguity. I understand I need to find a way to learn words. I started with pre-made deck. I used the Avida deck and
oh,
the
I used that. Yeah.
sentence and word deck. I went through the entire Avida deck. I deleted the English. The first thing I did with the Avida deck was I took it because I had already done it in the past actually once before, a couple times before, where I'd like go crazy and do like 50 to like 200 reps in a day
Oof, that's
sometimes.
strong. That's
But
strong.
like I started on that day and I was like, okay, I went deleted the field for English. So there's no English. There's only definition in English on my card.
Yeah.
So I went through the deck and I practiced kind of like using my brain to accept the ambiguity and use a dictionary to search up a word if it was really that bad
Oh wow,
in
that's
my
that's
ambiguity.
hardcore. That's intense.
So
Wow.
that's what I did in the start. First show that really sticks with me is actually Oh My Venus. I'm not sure if you know Oh My
I've
Venus.
not
I
heard
used
that
to.
one.
Oh my gosh, dude! Oh My Venus. I at first I thought it was because in Korean V
Yeah,
is like Venus.
yeah,
I
exactly.
thought it was
Yeah.
Oh My.
Watch
I
out.
thought it was. I was like, what? There's a show called Oh My Penis.
Yeah.
I was like, that's a little strange. But yeah, you find out B is a V in Korean. You'll learn that's what it
Yeah.
is. But yeah, every time they said that word in the show, I was always like, whoa, penis, what?
Oh, yeah. Slow
But
down.
yeah, slow down a little bit, right? But that was the first show I watched, and I remember every single day I'd sit down for like hours upon hours watching it, accepting the ambiguity. Then
Oh,
if I started to feel
like a
like,
god.
oh man, no, the God feeling didn't come just yet because I was still
Okay.
understanding like nothing.
Zero.
Well,
Okay.
not nothing.
Okay.
I was understanding little words every single day, little words, little words, little words, little words.
Little games. Yeah.
But eventually, I felt like a click, and I watched this without subtitles. Like I made it like a point, like
Oh.
I don't want to use subtitles for this show.
But you
But then
talk
I
about English
also
subtitles. Sorry.
without any subtitles.
Yeah. So, but when you say I watched this without subtitles, do you mean
Oh,
you were
truly?
originally watching it with English?
Oh no no no! I never watched. So actually, from the very start of Immersion, I never
Mm.
used English subtitles. So I was always
Ah.
like, I don't want to use English. But this was because of I went like super hardcore on like this Matt philosophy
Okay.
of
Okay.
if you want to be good, this is the way to do it. It
Forget
was like if
English.
you want to
Yeah.
be good, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. And I was like, I want to be good, and if I
Who
want to be
doesn't?
good, I'll do.
Mm.
I was like, how can I replicate what this guy? I mean, Matt's. You see all the hype he got. Like the man's Japanese is like legendary, right?
I mean,
So
yeah, it is. But I feel like there's part of Matt that that kind of wants you to believe that to kind of
yeah,
sell his
yeah,
brand. But that's
right,
again,
right, 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 right,
don't want
right, right.
to criticize the guy, but there is sort of an element of that, and that's why I'm always skeptical. People online, telling you if you take these vitamins, you're gonna get very strong or whatever they
Right,
talk
right,
about.
right, right. Yeah, and that's good. You
My
should. Everyone should
radar
always have.
goes off. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I actually think for in some ways, if it wasn't Matt and it was like some
Yeah,
other method that I was like, yo, this is the method, and I went,
yeah,
and then I came a year and a half forward, and I'm at this point now. Would I be
that's
the
good.
fact that I never questioned the
Mm,
method was
mm.
like, oh man, it's a little dangerous. But the thing
Yeah, it is
was,
a bit dangerous.
it just sound it's less so just sounds. It was like everything I had heard up until that point, and then what Matt had told me in that why you're not understanding your target language video, it just clicked
Yeah,
like
that language. Yeah,
like
because he did go. That was a whole half an hour video, right? And he goes into
right.
like
Exactly.
very sort of
So much
scientific stuff,
detail.
like your
Right.
consciousness and all this. And
Right.
it's proper spot on. So yeah, that was a good video. I'll probably have to go watch that again at some point.
Yeah, exactly. And I think from that point on, it was then, developing, finding new ways to find new media, et cetera, et cetera. And then one step at a time, 1 month at a time, you know, I could just see improvement, improvement, improvement. It went from like 1 month, 2 month, where I was like, I just reached a point where my ears started to start clicking with the sounds of the language was like the first step.
Hmm.
And then 3, 4, 3 and 4, my vocab started to like jump because I was like using a bunch. I was sentence mining. I actually started sentence mining from the first day, but I started sentence
Oh,
mining a lot more because of I had like better vocab. And then
yeah.
by like months 5 to 6, I was just doing a bunch of like listening, 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 listening. And man, I think by the time we reached month 7 and 8, that was actually February, which in
Okay.
February we had that that's when I met you.
Oh, really?
Remember?
I don't actually remember. You see, you got a really good sense of time, because I'm just like, oh,
You already
that
forgot.
year back then. Don't know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about, but yeah. So you met
Yeah,
me.
it was in February because of Jongin.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we
Jongin.
both did our interview on the This is
Right.
Big Data
Yeah, I
channel,
remember.
and
Right.
I don't know if I commented or it was through the server, wasn't it?
It was to the server.
Yeah.
This is the server that I was like, we talked a tiny bit, and then you just like connected a tiny bit, and boom, like we're like immersion, boom, boom, we started talking, and
And I
here
think
we are. What?
we were like the only ones, or maybe not the only ones, but it seemed that you and me sort of were on this sort of next level. Like we'd watched Mount versus Japan. We want to get real serious about this Korean
Right.
stuff. And it seemed that the other people, I'm not going to name any names, but other people in the server, like, they'll be like, oh, I'm only struggling to do like 2 hours a day. Whereas we're here like all the time, we're just like
Right.
so invested. And I think that was part of what actually made us like become friends, because we were had the same sort of end
Right, right,
goals in mind. Yeah,
right. I think yeah, that was a big part of it. We both kind of were on the same path. It's like we both started from the same kind of place, and then when we reached this point, and the only difference was like I introduced you to passive immersion
yeah,
on that
or
point.
or
Passive
rather,
immersion.
yeah, doing it
Except
properly. Yeah,
instead of music, I introduced you to
yeah,
passive immersion.
exactly.
And I mean, if we talk a little bit about kind of our transitions, because now we're kind of so I guess in that point, you spoke Korean in that interview. I remember,
I
right?
did. I speak Korean
Yeah.
in all my interviews on this channel, I believe.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because
So you're on output, right?
I am an output guy.
When did
I'm
you
not.
start
I'm not.
output? Is the question.
Yeah. Okay. See, actually, during my textbook days, and like sort of during the first year of immersion, I actually had a Korean tutor who I would speak
Oh.
to for an hour a week. So I'd hire someone
Oh.
online, and I would just output for an hour a week, just even if I know like people online had said it was like going to mess up your accent or whatever, but I just personally, one, I was skeptical, so I was like, I don't believe there's anything that can't be fixed, like you can fix anything. And then two, I wanted that motivation. And I tell you what, having a teacher, having a 1 hour a week conversation session does wonders for your motivation, because you're like, oh man, like if I progress this much in this week, I'm gonna be able to say all these cool things. And there was a sort of moment after about a year where I'd sort of look back on the notes from like the very first session or the very first few sessions. I'm like, wow,
Right.
like I'm actually like fluent. Like this is when you hit the fluency. Well, I mean,
Right.
fluency, but you hit the sort of comprehension levels where things are becoming like they're clicking. They're clicking.
Mm.
And that was just really something that was amazing. Output has never really been something that's scary to me. I feel like if you don't output, then why are you even learning a language? That's my
Mm.
opinion. But if you're just gonna sit at home and listen to stuff all day and then not make
Right.
any friends whatsoever, not even like use text chat or anything, then there's really not much point. You're learning the language. You can just watch TV with subtitles. I mean, that is the one argument. You'd be able to watch stuff without subtitles, understand it rawly, but you know,
Yeah. I
I don't
guess
think it's
that
that
also
big.
brings yeah, that
Output is
brings
like
the
the key
question.
factor. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that also comes to question with like the goals, because obviously, if
Hmm.
your goal is to speak Korean, at some point, speaking Korean is something you're gonna have to practice. It's not just gonna you're not gonna be perfect after just
Certainly.
input. That's like I agree that too.
Hmm.
But I guess with people that have like the goal of I like K-pop or I want to
Hmm.
understand my idol when they
I mean, that was
speak,
my sort
etc., etc. Right?
of motivation at one point in life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Just a note, guys. I'm not like a big fan anymore. There was a period. Okay.
Don't be ashamed. Don't be ashamed. Don't be
That is
ashamed.
true. That is true.
We
Got
got
it.
we
Got it.
got K. If you're a fan of K-pop, don't be ashamed. I was a big
Yeah.
fan of K-pop too. Yeah,
That's true. You're right. You're right. Don't
yeah.
be ashamed.
But I think what was it? What was I saying? Um, I actually don't remember. Anywho, what else are we gonna mention? So I guess on the topic of output, yeah. Right now, I haven't. I've actually just started. I've kind of. I guess I can't really say just start. You see, I guess there's a difference between texting output
Hmm.
and speaking output.
Yeah, but everyone does
Texting
texting, sort
output,
of.
texting output. I can say I probably started earlier.
Hmm.
I started texting
I've been doing
output.
that since day one.
I mean, technically, I started texting output I before I found immersion, and
Hmm.
then through the good friends that I made through HelloTalk. Sometimes I think there was like a time after I'd done like 9 months of immersion that we started texting again, and then then I started texting back with them. So I started texting back with friends like after like 9 months or so was when I started texting, but I wasn't doing like super frequently. On the topic of speaking,
Hmm.
I for the most part my first time speaking Korean, I spoke Korean. So I think I only spoke Korean like 4 times before, 4 or 5 times before immersion.
Well, yeah. There's no
So the
videos of
only
you online speaking,
there isn't
Korean.
any video of me speaking Korean online. Actually, maybe there is. There might be a video of me speaking a tiny bit of Korean, but not just in Korean.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember the first time I ever spoke Korean. This is actually a good thing. I'd like to hear from you too. But I was at a restaurant my brother was like, "Oh, I see you're studying Korean. Let's go to a restaurant." He took me. I think it was after I finished exams. He took me to this Korean restaurant, and I ordered the entire meal in Korean. And like, I was like,
Oh yeah,
oh,
yeah.
I was like,
You
bro,
got
I felt
confidence
like,
from that, huh?
because like the woman, the Ajuma, she
Yeah.
came up to me and she was like, "Whoa, what?" Like she was super
Did you
surprised, and
get
I
did
was
you
like,
get jealous in the other?
"Oh, the
Angamo
other tables,
jealousy? Yeah. Did you get
you."
that?
No, no, I don't think I got
No.
that. She was
Just
just like, "Oh, I guess in the," and she took it, right?
yeah, exactly. They do
But
that, you know. Because I
right,
was going to say, I've been to restaurants in the UK,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I order in Korean every time I go, and they never really say like, "Oh wow, you speak good Korean." They're just like, "Oh yeah, thanks." They just treat you like a normal human, which is quite
right,
nice.
right, right. And I
Yeah.
think part of that is my Korean was shit anyway. I mean,
I guess so.
I mean,
Yeah, they
yeah,
don't want to lie.
right, like, I respect that. It felt good because I said it and I was like, "Yo, am I already fluent? Am I fluent?" Because like, she didn't tell me. Do I sound native? Like,
I'm
I mean, I wasn't like that big in my head yet, right?
Hmm.
But for the most part, that day, I was like, "Yo, there's so much input. Like, the entire menu's in Korean." Like, this is the first time I've been in like in person experiencing Korean
Culture, yeah.
culture in a way in
Uh,
person my first
yeah,
time.
because you haven't
And that
been
was
there,
like,
yeah. Mm.
yeah, I've never been to Korea yet. It was kind of like, I guess part of it was like my exposure through media that I had like my in my class and like my
Mm.
teacher. And for the most part, that was like my first experience speaking Korean. How about you? What was your first time speaking Korean?
Well, I mean,
Was that
if we
all the
want to get
annyeonghaseyo?
yeah,
Was
yeah,
that
okay. Mine is the I would always try and use my textbook stuff whenever I went round to my friend's house. So in the UK, um, there's actually an area in the UK where a lot of Korean people come to live, and that's actually not too far from where I live. So if I wanted to go experience Korean restaurants and all this stuff, it's maybe like a half an hour drive away or something. So I would go to my friend's house who lived in this area, and if you go in their house, like it's the proper sort of they've got the family picture on the wall, like the what's it called? Not hanja, but like those paintings, the calligraphy where it's like it's old like yet hangul, like the old
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, it had
Right,
all of
right.
that and chopsticks, like the proper tables, proper furniture, and yeah, I would go in there, and every time there would be like a word, like a noun. So like I'd say like kal hanajusu, or like please give me a knife.
Right.
Just very small things that I picked up from my textbook, and they're always like, "Oh wow, you must like Korea." And I actually was introduced to like a lot of Korean games as well. So there's Ghost
Ooh.
Stop. There's actually
Yeah,
another
right.
card game called I Haligali. So it's what it is. It's like it's a card game where there's a bell in the middle. So there's a bell button, and you have all your cards around it. And it's like you have to match these fruits. The cards just have pictures of fruits, and you have to match it. And basically, the point
Right.
of the game is a stupid game where whoever hits the bell first wins. So you end up like hitting
Okay.
hands, right? And
Gotcha.
we would like play all these games and like have like so much fun. And the parents would like bring out all these Korean snacks to us, and I would be like, yeah, come something that. Obviously, this was when I still didn't really know what I was talking about, but I would be using it all the time. So
Hmm.
from when I was out in Korea as well, when I my my talked to being Korean level 2 level, I thought I was really good. And when I went to that school one day, I went to a Korean school. I was like, "안녕하세요," I what you call it, introduced myself, and I'd been outputting pretty much almost kind of since day one, but there was one significant output moment that I'm going to remember,
Oh yeah.
and I get a lot of people online who probably aren't going to believe me. And I've told you this story before personally, but
Oh,
I
oh, this
met
one.
ITZY, the band JYP Entertainment's ITZY. I have met them in
Crazy,
person
man.
and shaken hands with Yuna. And this story is actually really crazy because I got a sign, like an autograph from them, and it got stolen basically. And I don't know if I want to go into it now.
Might have to save that one
I
for
have to
another
save that. Okay,
episode.
we'll save that to another episode. But there was a time where
Oh
I
yeah.
met like the idol. Like this was the one time, the moment. Like Eminem. Like you only get one shot. Better make it
Right.
count. I was standing up. I remember I was saying something like I was using my basis. I was like 안녕하세요. Um, 저는 영국에서 왔어요. 여기 선물이에요. And I gave her like some like what, teddy bear or something.
Right,
And I
right,
thought I
right.
was the man. Like after that interaction, I was like, Korea chose, I'm the
Legendary.
man. I am the man.
ITZY chose you.
And I think she said like, Janmo Gasumi there, and then that was, and I was
uh,
like, bruh, like my
wow,
life.
legendary.
That moment like pretty much gave me hope for life. I was like, if I could
Oh
do this,
man.
if this event, like you said something like, if this event can happen, anything's possible, man. Like anything's
Right,
possible.
man. That
So,
that motivation, like
I
leading, dude. I can't even imagine.
don't
Yeah.
need any more motivation anymore after that.
Oh god.
Like,
Yeah,
woo.
man. Oh, that sounds like
But I mean,
amazing.
funnily enough, since then, because of the incident, I kind of since that point was when I sort of started to take steps away from K-pop. I think because my brain just sort of latched on to the sort of the negative side of what happened that day. Um, that's when I started to move into Korean hip hop and being really obsessed with that as opposed to K-pop. But yeah, output all day long. You
Oh
see
yeah.
me anywhere. I still play games with Korean people anywhere. Outputs. I just
Oh
love it.
yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
care
that's the
about
way
sounding
to
like an
go
idiot
now.
anymore.
Especially, I mean, how long you've been studying for? How long was it? Like
So with like
about
textbooks on and off for
I
like
guess.
4 years,
Well,
but
I
not
guess
really.
give us your studying entire from like very beginning, first intro. Like I guess your first like initial like I'm going to study Korean until now. How long was that? And then how long was it since immersion until now?
Okay, so the first initial sort of like I'm going to study, like actually studying, probably about a
Right.
1 year period. So the 1 year before I immersed with like textbooks, like I'd actually make a consistent effort, not just like here and there.
Right.
And then when I started immersing, I was already like quite deep into grammar guides, and I was just thinking like, why isn't this working? I thought I
Mm.
knew because there's some Korean kids at school, and I would say something like a little bit off, and they would be, oh, that's not quite right. And so it's been a total of like 1 year, so 2.5 years total.
2.5 years total
One
since you
18
first
months of
started.
immersion. Yeah,
Oh,
exactly. Yeah,
nice. Oh, 18 months of immersion. Tough, tough.
yeah.
Yeah, for me, yeah, so I started January. So it's been about almost so exactly 1 month from now will be 2 years and 4 days of studying Korean. Like I should say, I'm going to study Korean. But immersion wise, that will be so 2022 will be my 18th month. January 1st will be 18
That is a
months of
legendary.
immersion.
Are we gonna get
Yeah.
a special video, a special something for the 18-month mark?
Oh,
Or
we're gonna have to find out. We're gonna have to
okay,
find out. Wait and see. Watch. Come back to the next
stay
podcast.
tuned. Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah. So, for the most part, I think we can come to a close on this first podcast episode.
Yeah.
Thank you
Wow.
guys for listening and joining us for our first episode of the Korean Always podcast. Be sure to come back and check out our next episode. We'll be releasing approximately once a week, so stay tuned.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, guys. See you next time. Stay safe. Bye bye.